Hello and welcome everyone. Today's video features the brand new addition to World of Warships, the USS Constellation, which is based on the Lexington-class of battlecruisers, which were officially the only class of battlecruiser to be ever ordered by the United States Navy. While these 6 vessels were requested in 1911 as a reaction to the building of the Congo-class by the Japanese Navy, 4 of the ships, including the Constellation, were eventually cancelled and scrapped by 1922 to comply with the Washington Naval Treaty. 2, however, the Lexington and the Saratoga, were converted into the United States' first fleet carriers, both of which would go on to see extensive action across the Pacific theatre. The premium USS Constellation enters the game at Tier 8 and is designated a battleship for matchmaking purposes, bringing with her a very high speed for a battleship, just behind the French premiums Champagne and Flandre, hard-hitting 406mm guns and 10km radar. Before going into the complete stats of the Constellation, let me first put up the build I've been using, and all the numbers mentioned in this video are based on this exact build. It's a full survivability build for the most part, with some small exceptions. The inclusion of the surveillance radar upgrade in slot 2 is optional, but it does increase its duration long enough to fire 2 main battery salvos under most circumstances, unless there is some drastic maneuvering involved. And I've also gone for the steering gears mod in slot 4, as I've found the Constellation really does handle quite well even at high speed. Both of these choices do come at a cost, survivability wise. You will be set on fire more often and they will burn for longer duration, so it comes down to the player's personal choice here. With the build covered, let's look at the armor layout using a simple port screenshot. What will immediately be noticeable is the aft and fore-end plating of 27mm. There is a sacrifice for such high speed, and it comes as a reduction in armor protection. However, 27mm of armor is still enough to bounce 381mm shells from the likes of Bismarck, for example, when angled correctly, but you will still be vulnerable to overmatch from 406 or 410mm caliber guns or above. You can see a torpedo bulge consisting of 32mm stretches from in front of the first turret right back pretty close to the stern area, which accounts for a torpedo protection damage reduction of 20%. If we peel back this armor bulge, we can see the main casemate armor underneath, which provides 178mm of protection, again significantly lower than its Tier 8 American compatriots, while the upper casemate and main deck armor is both 57mm, while the superstructure gets 19mm of plating. The 4 gun turrets get decent armor protection, with a frontal plating of 457mm, 2 sloped sections of side plating 254 and 229mm. The top plating is 127mm and the rear plating is 229mm. Finally, survivability wise, Constellation gets 63,300 hit points. Again, a little on the low side, but on a par with, say, the USS Alabama. So we come to the Constellation's main battery. The whole original idea of this Lexington battlecruiser class was to combine high speed with hard-hitting gun power, and the Constellation does provide that. Constellation gets 8 406mm guns in 4 twin-mounted turrets, 2 fore and 2 aft, with a reload speed of 30 seconds, and a max firing range of 17.4 kilometers. These gun turrets have a 180-degree turning time of 30 seconds with battlecruiser-like dispersion of 194 meters and a gun sigma of 1.9. These 406mm guns can fire both high explosive and armor-piercing rounds. The HE shells can inflict a max damage of 5700 and can penetrate 68mm of armor with a 36% chance of setting the target on fire, with a shell speed of 803 meters per second. The armor-piercing rounds hit for a max damage of 12,400, which I did find a little strange, as it's less than all the other same-tier American premium battleships, but the shell speed is superior in comparison. It's the same as the Kansas, at 768 meters per second. If it's your first time in an American battleship, leading your target does take a bit of practice, and it does make long-range gunnery more difficult, as the target has more time to adjust course and speed. Constellation does have access to the spotting aircraft consumable, which can increase your max range to just under 21 kilometers, should the opportunity or need arise. Should you require more range, feel free to mount the Artillery Plotting Room mod in slot 3, which will increase your base range to over 20 kilometers, and then in combination with the spotter over 24 kilometers. But I've preferred to boost the range of the secondaries instead. USS Constellation comes armed with 20 127mm secondary battery guns in 10 twin-mounted turrets with a reload time of 6 seconds, firing high explosive rounds which can inflict a max damage of 1800. They have 21mm of armor penetration with a 5% chance of setting the target on fire, with a firing range of 7.9 kilometers and a shell velocity of 792 meters per second. I did find these generally to be quite useful against destroyers, especially when using speed to close on their smoke screens and popping radar, circumstances allowing, of course. It's not like I would recommend playing Constellation like a secondary battleship, and while situational, I generally preferred this secondary upgrade over the range, as I found landing shells at long range to be quite challenging. USS Constellation, unlike other American battleships, gets access to torpedoes, with 2 triple-mounted launchers, one on each side, located near the stern. With a reload time of 98 seconds, these are capable of a max damage of 16,633, with an effective range of 9.2 kilometers, with 55 knots of speed, and quite a low detection range of 1.1 kilometers. For comparison, these are almost identical to the torpedoes on the US destroyer USS Kidd. Again, like the secondaries, I found the usage to be quite situational, but they do add the surprise factor, doing decent damage, and again, while their inclusion may suggest a brawling playstyle, I would again recommend against brawling, if at all necessary, as the lack of armor will take a heavy toll in such engagements. Should you be faced with air attack, and let's face it, at tier 8, that's quite common these days, your best defense is sticking with your cruisers for combined AA support. And this is not at all difficult when having such very good speed. Should you find yourself isolated, Constellation has 130 AA guns in total, ranging from 20mm right up to 127mm. All combined, they pump out a continuous average damage of 367, the vast majority of which is short and medium range. Constellation does, however, fire 8 shell explosions per flak salvo, with a max damage of 1540, and the max firing range is 5.8 kilometers. All combined, this adds up to an AA defense rating of 90. Not terrible, but I'd still advise against getting isolated. However, when teamed up with another battleship or cruiser, this AA feels pretty decent. I just mentioned one of the advantages of having high speed is it allows you not only to keep pace with certain ships, but also allows one to disengage and reposition quickly when necessary. And Constellation is fast, with a base speed of 33.3 knots, which can be increased to 34.9 knots with the Sierra Mike signal flag mounted. The turning circle radius is not nearly as good as other battleships at 830 meters, being over 100 meters more in some cases, while the rudder shift time is 12.3 seconds, and very similar to its compatriots. Constellation's high speed is her advantage here. Despite her large size, one immediately expects Kansas levels of performance, but Constellation feels very far from sluggish, and actually, due to this high speed early on, I often found myself overextending while adjusting to this newfound mobility. Finally, stats-wise, Constellation gets a concealment rating of 47 with a surface detection range of 12.2 kilometers by enemy ships and from 10.5 kilometers by enemy aircraft. I must admit I did find Constellation quite difficult to adjust to at first. Having this 10-kilometer radar, it tempts one in close, and I would definitely advise saving this for mid to late game, or truly last-ditch attempts to save a game, as any kind of sustained focus fire can quickly end your game. I chose this game as it highlights a large number of its strengths and weaknesses, and I wanted a game where I could also show both the effective use of radar and get a couple of torpedoes into the bargain. The USS Constellation will be available in the premium shop, and for doubloons, the cheapest option being 12,800 doubloons in the armory. As always, I hope I was able to provide you some useful information on the USS Constellation, the ship stats, the recommended builds, and even some tips for playing her and avoiding potential trouble. If you would like to see some live Constellation gameplay or have any questions, feel free to come on over to Twitch. I stream regularly throughout the week. You can see the link here on screen and also in the video description below. I look forward to seeing you all. I'd like to thank you once again all for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more. Take a moment to check out some of my most recent videos and leave a comment below. And until the next time, keep sailing it like you stole it.